Welcome to Prose Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello and welcome to the Pros and Cons podcast, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like pros and sometimes we feel like cons. I'm Matan, I'm your host for today, and today with me are Alex Eldridge.
Hello, my name is Alex Eldridge. I'm a writer of short stories, which is very appropriate for today, and I've also written a couple of novels. Most recently, it's not yet been published, but I have been selected for the BAD crime fiction anthology.
Doing small applause right now.
Very small. So
finger applause.
Yeah. But other than that, been just a few short stories here and there gotten publication, and yeah, that's me.
Very cool. And on the other side of the Zoom, we have Paddy Boylan.
Hi, I'm Paddy Boylan, and someone once described me as the stupidest smart person they've ever met.
Is that someone in the room right now, or just
No?
No, okay.
No. They know who they are.
What else do you do?
I write, I teach writing, I edit. I'm a technical writer. I wear many hats, like all of us, I think. I wear many writing hats.
Yeah, I'm wearing the hat right now, technically.
You are, yeah.
Hats aside, like I said, my name is Matan, and when I'm not hosting or participating in Precipice Fiction podcast episodes, I teach English to high schoolers, and I also write short stories, and I'm working on a dark fantasy novel. Before I ask the ordinary question of what have you guys been reading, I'll just say to our listeners, today's episode is going to be about short stories. We're hoping to attack the subject from many angles that many of you may have not heard before. We're going to try to make it interesting and not just discuss what we like about short stories. But that does mean we are probably going to spoil the heck out of them. It's very hard for us to discuss short stories without getting into the things that make them great, which are often the way they end. So please be advised, if you hear the name of a story that is on your to-read list, either take it like a champ or pause the podcast. And now, gentlemen, what have you guys been reading, watching, playing?
Well, I've been playing Undertale, which is a recent generation. It's like a JRPG, Japanese RPG game. It's a really famous game in the indie space. That's really, really narrative heavy and very self-aware in what it does. I probably can't really explain how it works, but it's just a very engaging, very charming story. It's almost more a story than a game. Like,
in a sentence, what's the plot? What is it about?
You were a child who has fallen into a ravine that is full of monsters that have been banished by humans, and you have to make your way back to civilization.
Is it scary? Sounds scary.
It is unsettling at times. Yeah, I wouldn't say scary, but there's one thing in particular that happens that is very, very unnerving. I'll actually just tell you because it's kind of fucking brilliant. So you go through a one bit, and there's an option to save this character or start a fight. And the first time I went through and killed them because I just thought that was the only thing. And then you get through it, and I was like, oh, actually, that was kind of a bad thing to do. I want to reset that. And I hadn't saved. And then I did it again and saved her. And then the enemy who you see leaving that space calls you out for doing that, even though you haven't saved the game. It's like,
wow,
you feel really seen. It's very spooky. It's very, very clever.
Yeah, it's one of those writing things that I guess only a game can do, right?
Yeah. It's a ludic phenomenon. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so that's my answer.
Undertale. Okay.
I've been wanting to play that for a while, actually. I've been aware of it, but haven't played it. So yeah, if you recommend it,
it's not. I think it's only $6 or something, maybe a little more.
Is right.
Yeah, I recommend it.
That's like a really expensive coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like an overpriced coffee.
In Sydney, that's just a coffee. that is literally just a coffee.
It's actually
Paddy, between expensive coffees, what do you do?
Okay, well, you'll be proud of me, Matan. I think I'm reading a manga for the first time.
Nice.
Oh.
Yeah, never read one. A friend of mine bullied me into reading Tower Dungeon. There's apparently dark fantasy is really having a moment in manga recently. It is a dark fantasy, kind of a dungeon crawly thing. Very cool monster design, very interesting dark plot. I won't get into it too much, but it's good. If anyone likes dark fantasy manga, I recommend Tower Dungeon.
Is it an isekai?
I don't
Like
know what that
where the
means.
player falls?
Isn't everything an isekai right now?
Well, yeah.
Isn't that like the
these
default?
guys having a moment too. Yeah. I
What's
feel
an
like it.
isekai?
Everything's an isekai until told otherwise. Isekai is when the protagonist is transported to another world,
Usually a video game or like a fantasy setting or something.
like
It
Inuyasha
is not
before it
that.
got ruined.
Yeah.
I don't know what these words mean.
Oh wow, Inuyasha. Okay, let's not go there.
What language is this? Anyway, that
Japanese.
and also I recently saw a film that Alex recommended on a past podcast called Triangle. I've never seen a movie start so janky and rickety and end so good. Like so good. Like if this movie had proper production values and better acting, it might be one of my favorite films. So
Oh,
Triangle.
wow.
If you're gonna watch
That's
it,
incredible.
get through the first 20 minutes, push through.
It's worth it.
gets
Yeah.
good.
Sounds
yeah.
sounds terrific. Okay, I've just finished Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's a sci-fi book.
Cool.
Same guy that wrote The Martian, which was made into a movie with Matt Damon. Project Hail Mary is the book of a man who wakes up with amnesia. The thing is, he realized that he has woken up inside a spaceship. And he's slowly realizing through his returning memories that he's not just on a spaceship alone, he's been sent to save the world. And very much like the title, it does feel like a Hail Mary in it, that it's very, very unlikely for him to succeed. The book is terrific. It's extremely readable, which is a very Andy Weir thing. I hope I'm saying his name correctly.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something, after all the Wolf Halls and all the Shakespeare I've been reading, I kind of wanted something that is easy. Now, easy is not bad, but easy as in the prose is just direct and just like tells you this is what happened, hopefully with a bit of humor. And I definitely recommend this book for anyone who wants a light read. It is not short, but it is light. I hope that made sense.
I had an interview with Andy Weir once, and he was talking about how he wanted to get the details in The Martian absolutely correct, and like the massive amount of research the guy does. It's very impressive.
Very impressive. I think he was an engineer of a sort before he became an author.
Yeah.
That
sounds right.
tracks.
Very, very hard sci-fi.
Yeah, super hard,
Yes,
super
yes,
into the
yeah.
details. He's going to pop up in our podcast too, because he does have a history of short stories. Okay, guys, today I wanted to discuss short stories with you, and specifically, I wanted to talk about short stories' function in the writing world. And what do I mean by that is that, at least in my opinion, everybody read novels, right? The general reader is familiar with novels, but I kind of feel like short stories is something that not everybody regularly reads. Even people who read, as a way of life, they have a lot of books in their house. They haven't necessarily read a short story in a long time. And there could be many reasons for that. I feel that personally, I engage with short stories a lot in university as part of my academic learning and as part of my career as a writer, because as writers, we kind of, we float in particular spaces where short stories are very common, that maybe if we were not writers, if we were just readers, we might have not been in those spaces. Like I would not go into Writer's Digest had I not been trying to achieve publication. I would have not read the honestly terrific Writers of the Future magazine had I not been regularly submitting to it and trying to see what kind of stories get traction there. So while short stories can be amazing, it kind of feels to me like, at least in the modern times, the question kind of rises of who are they for? And who is reading them when they're not part of an anthology by Neil Gaiman or someone who's a household name? So while we are going to tackle that question, I wanted to start with something lighter, which is just to hear from you guys. What are some of the short stories that have left a good, strong impression on you?
I'll go. So the one that I always think of when I think of like the platonic ideal of the short story is this one by Roald Dahl, of course, because he's okay. So to preface it, a lot of people think of Roald Dahl as a children's author. He's in fact written some really good memoir, and also he was a really good short story writer.
Really?
He wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yep.
He wrote
James the Giant Peach,
Matilda.
The Witches,
Were his short stories, was this adult stuff before he was a children's author, or?
I couldn't tell you I think so, but I couldn't
Interesting.
tell you. This one though, this
Yep.
one is particularly interesting though. This one is called Parson's Pleasure. And what's really interesting about this is the concept of it was gifted to him by Ian Fleming, the writer of the James Bond stories, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the idea of this story, and I am going to ruin it, as you know, spoiler warning has been said. Basically, there's this guy who he pretends to be a parson, and he drives around to these houses, and he tries to find rare furniture. Okay, and then he sees them in these old barnyards because they've been stored away for like hundreds of years because England. And he finds these rare pieces, and he sort of buys them for a song, and then sells them on because he's really an art dealer. But he pretends to be a parson, right? So he goes around to this one house, goes into the house, and walks around. He sees this one piece that's like really, really famous. It's like a table, right? He's like, oh, let me just take this off your hands because like this is an old piece of junk. But he's basically just saying like, hey, let me just take it. Like you don't need this. Like you're not going to be able to do anything with this. And the story goes on and back and forth, and he's haggling and talking to these guys, and they're initially a bit distrustful and blah blah blah. But eventually, he basically convinces them to do it. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to go get my car. And the twist of the story is he's like, okay, I want to take this. It might not fit in my car. Well, look, I'll go and get my car and see how it goes. And this is worth like thousands of dollars today, right? Like $10,000. He comes back with the car and he finds that the guys chopped the legs off the table.
What the fuck?
So ruining the whole thing. And that's
Why would you do that?
Because he's like, oh, he needs to get in the car. He may not take it if it's
Oh,
not
I
able
love
to fit
it.
the
I
car.
love it. I love it. I love it.
It's so
That's
good.
good.
It's such
That's
a good
good.
story.
I
yeah.
can do it justice. But it's got all the setups of a short story. You know, it's got this weird kind of deceptive character at the beginning, and you don't know what his intentions are. He's a bit of a rascal. The two guys are like farmhands. They're sort of like English bumpkin countryside folk. It's just really interesting. So that's probably my pick for like one of my favorite short stories.
That's a good one,
It's
Alex.
strange concept. Yeah, you should read it
really
anyway.
Plays to the strengths.
Yeah, read it anyway because it's a really good story.
Have you read The Lamb to the Slaughter, also by Roald Dahl?
Probably. Oh, is that
Short
the one with
story.
with
That doesn't sound like a
the
children's
wife
book.
and the leg of
No,
lamb?
it is not at all. A pregnant wife discovers that her husband is leaving her. She's having something of a psychological meltdown. She decides to go make dinner, and as she's
Where is
going
this
to look for
going?
meat, she finds a frozen leg of lamb and
Yeah, this is the
basically embodies the sentence, if I can't have you, no one can. She whacks the guy, she kills him, she calls the police, and she feeds them the murder weapon, the leg of lamb, and thus earns her ultimate freedom and escape from punishment. By
I thought something was going to happen with the pregnancy, though.
Oh, no. That's just
was very
us,
worried.
modern writers being way more fucked up. Paddy, give me a short story. Come on.
So what's interesting is the one that when you sent us, the prompts, the first thing that came to mind was a story called "The 9 Billion Names of God." Such a good name.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you've
love
seen
it.
it, or you've read it rather. Yeah,
I've taught it to my students.
Oh, it's Arthur C. Clarke. And what's funny, Alex, is as you were telling that story, I realized that this story has some similar things. As a character who is not exactly a grifter, but you think they're the one that's going to get the last laugh, and then
Okay.
things are turned around on them.
Yeah.
Also, the ending, like it sounds like your short story ends right at the moment, the big emotional moment of climax. It's just like, and then it just ends. Same with the 9 Billion Names of God. So I'll try and be brief. It's the 1950s, I think, and there's a Tibetan monastery, and they hire these two computer engineers. Why do monks need computer engineers? Well, they want to calculate all the 9 billion names of God. Apparently, they've worked out, according to their scriptures, that God has 9 billion names. And to work out all of them, it's going to take a lot of number crunching. If they do it by hand, it's going to take 15,000 years. So they need a computer, which is going to take 3 months. When the engineers say, why do you want to work out the 9 billion names of God? The monks say, well, that's the purpose of the universe. And once the names are worked out, the universe will come to a close. God will close out the universe. The engineer's like, okay,
Very Douglas Adams.
you do you guys. Fine, whatever. They're paying us. Cool. They install this computer. And they hang out for 3 months, like troubleshooting. And then they decide, well, we probably want to leave before the 3 months are up because they're like, we don't want to be around when
When
the
they
computer
discover they're
program
wrong.
finishes.
Yeah.
And the monks are going to be pissed. They're going to blame us. So they leave, right? There's a few hours left to go on the program. And as they're leaving, one of them looks up at the sky and an expression of horror comes over his face. And he says, look up there. And the other guy looks and all the stars in the sky are slowly, one after one, blinking out, and that's the end of the story.
Shit.
Wow.
It's
Man.
such a good point to end on, and like, there's
Yeah.
nothing happens after that. It ends
Yeah,
right
yeah.
on
I mean,
the
That's all you need.
cliffhanging
Yeah.
moment. Yeah, that's what short stories do so well.
I think some of the best sci-fi or the best horror is the sci-fi and horror that you don't know that you're inside a sci-fi story until the end.
Ooh,
Yeah.
true.
Sometimes it can feel like a cop-out, like Cloverfield Lane. You know, like when
Oh,
suddenly,
I haven't seen it.
spoiler
Oh, wait,
alert.
wait. I haven't seen it. I'm going to see it very soon.
Well, yeah, we
Please
don't have a
say what
spoiler
happens
wall
in
for that one.
Are you? It's 2010, Paddy. It's been
No, I
14
know, but I
years.
am actually going to see it soon. Please don't say what happens.
Okay, you got like 3 by the next podcast. I'm gonna spoil it for you.
Yeah.
Okay,
fine.
just to put a fire under you. No, but excellent story choice, Paddy. I'm
Yeah,
just
that's
gonna
great.
mention one that I really
wanna read
like.
that now.
You should, Alex. It's good.
You guys are familiar with Shirley Jackson, the
Yeah,
writer
yeah,
of
yeah.
The Haunting of Hill
Oh.
House.
Oh, the lottery?
Oh yeah, she wrote that one
Yes.
story called The Lottery, which I've also taught to my students because I'm an irresponsible teacher.
Lottery is
The
incredible.
lottery was another one that
Yeah.
I was going to mention. Continue.
So The Lottery, The Lottery is basically you are reading a story through the point of view of, I guess, an entire town where they do a lottery every year. Every single member of the town gets like a stone or a ticket, I can't remember, and you basically, as the reader, you're waiting to see what is the lottery for, and the whole thing is treated like a fair. You know, it's like it's a happy thing. Everybody's coming, everybody's excited, they're making jokes, and slowly, as the pool of possible winners dwindle down, you kind of see that people are not too happy to be remaining in the winning pool for some reason. The true skill of this story is that Jackson really takes you through it slowly, giving you just enough hints that something's not quite kosher, without actually spoiling the end for you. By the end of it, you realize that these are a bunch of, spoiler alert, we're going to call them sick occultists for the lack of another description, because once a year, these people actually sacrifice one of their own for the gods of the harvest or something. Like they truly believe that if they stop doing the lottery, the crops are not going to yield or something like that. And you could look at it as a message of like, we just accept certain traditions because they are tradition. We don't question them. We don't check them. But what I love about that story is how slowly and effectively and honestly terrifyingly Shirley Jackson kind of reveals the truth to you. Kind of feels like an inevitable spiral down towards this
creeping
horrible
dread.
truth.
Once again,
Yeah.
the note it ends on, I believe it ends on the woman who wins, quote unquote, is like screaming
Yeah.
and begging and saying, no, just as the
Begging for
rocks
her
come
life.
flying at her. And like, once
Yeah.
again, the story just ends on that, like the most emotional note. So it's
And that's
a thing that
such a
stories do
short
so
story
well.
thing.
It is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. Something that I think we crave in any long book is the payoff, the catharsis, the epilogue a lot of times, right? It's not enough for me to know that Frodo destroyed the ring. I want to see what happened to the Shire. I want to see if Sam got married. It's not enough. Yeah, it's not enough for me that, imagine if Star Wars ended with Luke blowing up the Death Star and the credits roll in. You'd be like, what the hell? That's it? Even then, by the way, Star Wars ending is quite abrupt because we basically see them getting medals and then bye-bye. But
Still effective.
that's something that you get from a long story. You get the after effects, especially if you're doing a hero's journey. A big part of it is returning to the home as a changed person.
I would say that's true, with the exception of thrillers that end on the last possible moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
the only exception. Thrillers basically end at the same point short stories end. They end at the last possible moment of escape. A lot of the time, it'll just be like, there's no more. Like,
and on an ambiguous note as well.
Exactly.
Sometimes
a lot of times. Horror movies too.
Yeah.
But my point is that short stories don't have that privilege. They don't get to spend 3,000, 4,000 words on those subjects most of the time. But on the other hand, when you are building a novel, a lot of the time, readers will complain about the lull in the middle, right? The flat middle of a lot of books. Like, oh, it was so good at the beginning. The ending was great, but man, I can't tell you what happened between page 100 and 250. And obviously, when you're writing a short story, that's not a problem because you can just condense it to the important story beats without worrying about the middle section. So what I'm going with this, guys, is I'd like to hear from you. What do you think are the advantages for a writer, for a reader, that a short story has over a novel and vice versa?
Okay. a short story can be really punchy. Like all the stories we told, it's like one simple concept, self-contained, and it ends on the high note. And also, I think all these stories just kind of start like almost mid-scene as well. Like you're not given the full prologue. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, and the characters are here and they're just talking, and it picks up in the middle of progress. Short stories can be so punchy in ways that long form can't be. Like a short story can't overstay its welcome if it's well told, because it's over too quickly. I think the best short stories are those like simple concept, in and out, done, really impactful.
Yeah. I think J.G. Ballard had a quote where he said, "There are perfect short stories, there are no perfect novels." And I think that's a really good summation of what it is.
Yeah.
Good one.
To me, short stories are like these they're like things in miniature. They're, I mean, they
Yes.
literally are. It's like the difference between a big, like carved, speaking about furniture, like a big carved like table or something or chair, and then like a little dollhouse of like miniatures. These like they're
Yeah.
because they're so small, you can just hone each word so to perfection, and
Yeah.
there's no wasted space at all. They're just these
Yeah.
very complete composite stories. And I'm really drawn to that as sort of well, I mean, as a writer, it's easier to do that because, you don't have to
Tell
do
me more
this.
about the writer side of it, Alex.
Yeah, okay, cool. So as a writer, there's a little bit of politics to it because basically your way into writing is through short stories. There are very few people. There are exceptions, but I'd say they're very rare, and I would dissuade people in general from doing it this way. There are very few people that start just writing a novel like the first time and writing it all the way through. That's why you hear about a bunch of people who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on my novel. I did a novel," like, and it just never gets finished. It's a very, very, very common thing. Short stories, though, you can go and you can iterate. You can do a 500-word short story. So it's this very good way of like learning the different beats of a story, because in some sense all stories are the same. They can be extrapolated. You have the first bit, the inciting incident, you have the middle, and then you have the conclusion, like at a very simple level, and you can start workshopping that and learning that thing together. At the same time, you can send those stories to people and you can get constructive feedback, and you can also get literary cachet, I guess. It's like, oh, this person is a writer because they do that. So short stories play this very pivotal role for people beginning their careers. So it's a chance to hone your craft and also to get into the writing sort of thing.
Yeah, well
Okay.
said. I teach high school aged students writing, and boy, a lot of them are writing a novel straight up. And I often tell them, like, hey, cool, like that's impressive, but you're starting on hard mode. Like,
Yeah.
be aware that this is the difficult thing to do.
I wanted to expand on that, Paddy. Why do you think they're going straight to the novel?
Well, which one of you before said that short stories tend to only be read by writerly types and people just go straight to novels?
I mentioned that.
Okay,
earlier.
I think it's that, because when people think I want to be a writer, they just think novels. And you think like, I want to be a writer, I want to tell a story. You're like, what will it be? Well, of course it's a novel, because that's the form.
What you're engaging with.
Yeah, I have a question for you guys. Why do you think novels have become the default? Because like intuitively you'd think that short stories would be, if they're shorter and simpler and more accessible than these huge winding tales.
Can I put my history cap for a second?
Yeah.
If you go back to the Victorian era, which could be said to be the first golden age of books. I'm not going to call it the golden age, but the first golden age of books. These novels by Dickens and Shelley, certainly Dickens, I'll hold up, maybe Shelley not, but still, they were not published as novels for you to take home. People couldn't necessarily afford to buy a full book, or maybe they just weren't used to that. You would read it in chapters, in chunks, in the weekly or monthly published magazines.
Yeah, I thought
the
about
idea
this.
of taking a whole book and putting it on your bookshelf and reading it in one sitting, that's not even how these stories were originally written. Like, in a way, a lot of the Dickens chapters kind of feel like they need to stand on their own, because he's not expecting you to have read the previous chapter an hour ago. He's expecting you to have read it a week or 2 weeks ago. Almost like serialized TV shows. So what happens here is you got to ask yourself, how did we go from that to the idea of, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read The Hobbit in 3 days? How did we get there? And that basically formed the idea in your students and in a lot of us, I think, early on, is that to be an author, a real author, you got to hammer out a book, not a short story.
And I'd say there's economic concerns as well these days. For whatever reason, novellas are harder to sell. This is what I hear all the time in just sort of author circles. Novellas are harder to sell. Short stories are impossible to sell by themselves. You can't. It may be on Kindle, but for some reason the de jour sort of package is just the 60,000, no, really more like 80,000 word book, and it's just there, and it's like that's what we put on the shelves, and that's what's taking up space, and you can see the spine from that. Any shorter than that, I guess it can't even be seen. So that might be something to do with it. It's a really good question, actually. I'd like to look into it.
At risk of like taking us way further off the beaten track, maybe it's because like as a sellable unit, a short story, you can't really sell that because like it's too small. Like, what do you charge? Are people really getting around the way by a short story?
It's 30 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe a book is like kind of the smallest thing that feels like a single saleable item. You know, I'm going to buy a book. I'm going to go to the store and buy a book. Anything less doesn't feel worth it. Just spitballing, but maybe.
No, I like your theory, because think about it. Would you pay for a TV episode?
No.
You would pay for a movie. You might rent a movie,
but
$3.
Yeah.
You've paid for a TV episode?
Yep. Yeah. If I really want to see something, it'll be on YouTube, and I can't
much
find
do you pay?
anywhere else. I'll pay $3 if I have to.
But $3.99 is like what you get for a movie, though.
If I really like,
I'm not calling you a bad customer, Alex, but I mean,
and a bad person.
yeah, terrible person.
But the point is that Alex, you're the exception. You're the exception. Right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't do that for a whole. I wouldn't buy it episode by episode. Like it would it's just not functional. You know, there's this compression, this economic compression, where it's like, well, the bigger things get sold at a smaller price now, because a book is pretty expensive. Like, I mean, like what do you sell a book for?
Yeah,
like, the Penguin Classics, like 12.
No, you can buy for $10.
But yeah,
I think Australian books are actually more expensive than other book markets.
I want to go back to what Paddy said. All these things we came up with are very mature adult reasons. Economics, the spine is too thin to be seen on the shelf, all that stuff. But if you're a young 14, 13-year-old kid who's dreaming to be a writer and your mind immediately takes you to the novel, it's likely not because of these reasons. It's not because you're thinking, oh, economically, it's really hard to sell a novella. No, that's not what's going through their mind. It's almost like this psychological barrier in our head into what constitutes an author and what doesn't. I think that's it, at least for when you're young.
It's an identity thing. One other thing I would say as well is that kids don't have a lot of experience with short, kids up after fairy tale age kids don't have a lot of experience with short stories. There's not a lot of opportunity for them to read short stories outside of school, like which goes back into the economic question again. It's so the novel becomes, because that's what they see. That's what's in there, even their like school libraries or something. These things, that's what they see at the bookstore. That's what they see advertised on billboards and things. They go, oh, that's what you do as an author. You do a novel. You don't make short stories. I think that's the main thing. It's just that's what they've seen as being writerly or anything to do with writing, and then they kind of go for that.
But if you open the bibliography, is that the right term? Not the bibliography. If you open the works of many writers,
that's it, bibliography,
you will find a lot of times a fat list of short stories.
Yeah, it's where you learn the craft.
I'm gonna ask the next question that kind of takes us a little bit away. I know there's a lot of horror fans among us in this podcast and in general, but still, what do you think is some of the genres that are best served by the format of a short story? Feel free to say which genres don't work for you as a short story too.
So before this episode, I did a little bit of research, and some people were saying that science fiction doesn't lend itself to short stories because there's necessary world building. I totally disagree.
Yeah.
I think, right? I think science fiction lends itself.
Disagree.
Yeah, so well, because science fiction is all about the exploration of cool ideas. And I think the short story is such a cool format to be like, hey, here's an idea. What if ... And then boom, the story. Yeah, exactly. And then that's it. It's almost like a short story is a single thought experiment. And science fiction is all about that shit.
Yeah. Leapfrogging off that, there's an author called Ian M. Banks. I think you've definitely read him.
Yeah, he sounds familiar. So
he as Ian Banks, not Ian M. Banks, are two different monikers. He did something called the Wasp Factory, which you recommended to me, which I didn't like at the time, but very, very much stayed with me. Anyway, he wrote a short story I forget what it was called because I listened to it and I didn't see the title. But basically, it was like it's the story of this alien, this plant-like alien, and because it's a short story, you don't kind of get to see all the context. You just kind of have to work it out. He's apparently some kind of shepherd, and what happens is he sees some weird sort of thing come down, and it's never explicitly said that it's a human in a
In a diving suit?
well, no, in a spacesuit, right? But you can intuit that based on the context of what it looks like. It says it's got a shiny helmet and like a suit, all that sort of stuff. And basically, what he does is he slowly kills the human by like popping its fingers off.
Oh
which,
God,
which sounds really horrific.
that's how he kills him.
Yeah, and then his head. But
So slow.
it's couched in the context of almost like a love story. He's pining over this girl, and he's like, "Oh, I wonder if she like really loves me." And he does
just
the
pulling
like,
the
she
petals
loves
off
me,
a
loves me
flower,
not
like-
with the fingers, and it's so
fingers,
it's like
yeah.
it's
Oh,
such an
man.
interesting recontextualization
Christ.
of something that's objectively really horrifying.
That's good.
But,
I
but
like
it's quite
that.
charming in the context of this story. It's
Yeah.
and like you're still like, oh, wait a minute, but it's very
That's
clever.
good.
So that's a good example of science fiction. I think I'm going to say horror is an optimum genre for it because it naturally mirrors the ramp up of tension that is inherent in a horror story, and then not all short stories, but I think a lot of good ones have a twist or at least a high tension moment. Horror naturally
Yeah.
lends itself to that. Also, if you go too long with horror, you'll notice a lot of good horror books, and I've mentioned this before, will have this beginning that's really, really, really high tension, and then will drop off, and then it'd be this slower secondary build to the second
yeah.
half of the book, or there'll be a period of like diffused tension.
Exactly.
So that first bit of a novel is usually just a short story. I'm inclined to think that Bram Stoker wrote Dracula as a short story first, and then was like, okay, I'm gonna make this.
Just
Because those
lost
first-
control of it. Like, okay.
yeah, totally.
And then
It's
what
fun.
happened? And then what happened?
So Alex, you were talking about like horror having the twist. So you mean like if it were a short story, the twist is the end of the story, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
the
totally.
twist, the crazy moment, and then
Yeah.
bam, it ends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Again, like ending on that cliffhanger kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'd say horror.
I'm
yeah.
just going to support what you two have said about what genres work. I think sci-fi is fantastic for short stories.
So good.
Horror, obviously.
Probably mystery as well.
Yeah, sure. But I think the genre that suffers the most from short stories is, and I'm going to try to be specific here, fantasy that is not founded on a single cool idea. What do I mean by that? A
Yes.
single cool idea. And I think fantasy that's a bit like sci-fi, like, ooh, imagine if a lawyer is a werewolf. Okay, that's what I mean, a single cool idea.
Yeah.
Like there's
Werewolf.
this situation, but like a diver that can talk to sharks. Okay, that can something like that. But if your fantasy just leans into the usual trappings of fantasy, like the high fantasy or the urban fantasy that everybody know, in a novel that can work. You know, you can be the guy that writes another sword and magic story. If your characters are good, your tension are good, maybe your characters are dropping F-bombs and that's unique. But the point is, you can still go into that well-known field, you know, throw the gauntlet down and do your story will be great. You can't do that with a short story because if you're not innovating in fantasy, I think it won't work as punchy and short.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of people can write fantasy stories about the urban fantasy. You know, there are orcs in the city, there are fairies in the city. Again, if you're writing a novel, you have the time to show your way of doing that. You have the time to show your version of it, your little quirks, your little differences. But in a short story, it's all about, I think, especially in sci-fi, in the innovation. I once read a really great short story, a fantasy story, that's about a couple of girls. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the story, whose father has been revived as a zombie by the mother. And basically they live with their zombie father. Super unique, almost sci-fi-ish in the way it goes about it. That can work. The long form fantasy, the high fantasy, I think that cannot work very well in short story form.
Because there's so much implicit world building in it that you need to like the Council of Telzat. So I think that's one of your characters.
yeah.
Actually.
Yes, it is. I wasn't going to say anything, but
Telzat,
yes. Yes.
No, but you know, like there's this whole like, I guess you could use a short form and go like, okay, I know what's going on based on what's here, but there's so much of this world building, this specific world building and a society like top down that you'd have to build into it that makes it really tricky.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have a lot of time for
Yep.
that stuff myself, so it's hard to speak on it, I suppose. But
It also is. I haven't read a ton of romance, but I'm assuming romance is something that wouldn't really lend itself to the short story either, because you
Well,
need
didn't know about
such
that.
a simmer and a build up. Really? Okay.
Ooh, simmer.
yeah, I don't
love
know. I
that.
think because
Yeah.
I've
Ooh,
often,
romance has got to simmer.
Steamy, you know, it
Simmer.
has to be.
I've
Gotta
often
have the
thought
steamy simmer.
that horror and romance probably
Lightly
follow this-
boil for 10 minutes. Sorry.
Let Alex talk. Come on.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
go ahead.
go on, please.
I apologize.
I feel like horror and romance sort of have a similar trajectory in the way that tension is built. It's like, oh, the tension's building up to the monster being revealed. Oh, the tension's building up to the first kiss. You know, like I feel like those are sort of roughly parallel tension trajectories.
Well, it just feels
Yeah.
like if the romance ends at the first kiss, you'd be like, and? And?
Well, it
But-
depends.
Did
on
he
the
call
romance,
her?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read a ton of romance, though, so I
Yeah, I should.
Ooh, you should.
definitely, let's
You
be
should.
honest.
Yeah.
Have you?
Does Shakespeare count as romance? I don't
guess
know.
it could.
Technically, yeah.
Does Romeo and Juliet
No,
count as
it-
romance?
I mean, two obsessive teenagers kill themselves. Kind of sounds like Twilight, but
Well, it
yeah.
was a satire originally, I think.
Romeo and
Was it?
Juliet.
Yeah, it was like
no,
meant to be
I don't
not-
know.
not a parody, but like a satire because it's like this is
Ah.
insane.
You could argue that about a lot of Shakespeare, I think. Like Shakespeare's just making fun of us.
yeah.
It's like,
okay.
what about these crazy kids, huh?
Gentlemen, how do you feel about going straight to the game?
Oh, I'd like that more
I-
than anything.
I do love a game.
Yeah.
All right, I have news for you guys. As very often in my podcast, we're going to finish with a game, but this game is a bit different because I thought, oh wow, there's just the two of them. It doesn't feel like a game. It feels like it should have stakes. So I thought
Stakes. One of us is out of Precipice Fiction. The loser out.
I wasn't going to go
Gone.
that far. I was just thinking. Whoever wins should have something out of it because it is a hard game. So
Okay.
we'll leave it at just like temporary superiority. Okay, for the next few weeks, we'll
All
just
right.
That's
all
great.
regard that other person slightly higher than the other.
Done.
Well, okay. Well, we live in the same city, so what about the other person owes them a beer? How's that?
Oh,
mean,
but that sounds like
I
you're both
agree to
winning.
that.
Like you
I
get
agree
to
to
have a
that.
beer.
Oh, you get
We're
to
gonna have a
hang
beer
out.
anyway,
beer.
so
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
Alex,
All right,
that's
sure.
it. You're on. One,
Okay, yeah.
one beer.
Done.
One
The beer
beer.
game. Let's
Yeah,
go.
alright,
They shook hands
alright.
virtually. All right, guys, I need you to close your eyes. I'm going to share the thing.
Okay, all right.
Alex, could you allow sharing?
Hang
Okay,
on.
Google, activate the share mode.
Okay, welcome. You can open your eyes. Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome.
Oh
to
my
Is
God.
Story
hell yeah.
short or long. Listeners, I made this beautiful animated graphic. If you are simply
This is
listening,
amazing.
That's incredible.
it is super amazing. You're missing out, listeners. So if you're just listening, maybe look us up on socials. We'll probably upload this section as a video for
Yeah,
you guys
this
to
will be
enjoy the
on
visuals that I
YouTube.
made.
Yeah, we've got a
All right,
YouTube channel.
is
Yes, look at the beauty
Okay.
of the graphics in YouTube. This
Facebook.
is so much
Watch
freaking
the
work,
thing.
Baton.
It's amazing. This
Or
is
we'll
the,
just
this is the thumbnail right here.
Yeah, we'll just
Yes.
describe it.
Oh yes.
All right, is the story short or long? That's the name of the game, and here's how it's going to work. I have done my best to describe, in short, some of the most well-known short stories and novels, and you two, just from the description, are going to have to decide: is
Oh,
it
I
a
like
short
that.
story or is it a novel?
I like that.
Now, if you can name
Mm.
the story,
Good.
that would count as extra points.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
ready?
Well, hang
ready.
on. Before you start, Matan, you did say that you think one of us will probably win.
Oh,
You said you would
yeah.
tell us who it is.
right. I don't know how to do this without hurting feelings.
Just say it. Just rip the band-aid off.
All right, Paddy, you read some excellent stuff, but you have
know.
missed out on
know.
certain mainstream junky things that
You
I
got
know.
blind spots,
people are
Paddy.
more familiar with.
I,
You got
it's-
blind
it's
spots.
true.
The
It's
stuff
true.
that you do know so freaking well. But Alex is
Me and
more
Matan are normies.
well balanced.
So I think you've just read more than me, to be honest.
Nah, maybe. I don't know.
So I get a
do
handicap,
think-
right?
Okay, if
I listen to
if
a lot
I
of
lose
audiobooks.
my guess, I'll buy you a beer from here. Okay,
It's gonna be very difficult, but
Paddy,
okay.
you'll get a second beer.
Oh, it's gonna be
Right.
bad if I lose. It's gonna be upsetting. I'll be-
Alex, do not make me look
It's
bad.
true.
Do not
Yeah.
make me look worse.
Okay.
Hey, listeners, just to clarify, I do believe Alex Eldridge is going to win this one. All right.
I think so. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
Love you,
we'll
Paddy.
see.
All right. First one. Oh, there's an animation. Okay. A woman driven to madness as a result of a Victorian rescuer forcing her to stay home in what was once thought to be good for woman. I put the good for woman in quotation marks.
Okay, so do we just answer or?
First, say short story or novel.
I can say both. It's a short story. I know.
Don't say the name until both of you gave the answer.
Okay. I'm gonna say short story.
Well, I didn't know, but now I'm going to say short story because Alex says he knows it, which isn't fair, but I can't not say it now. So I think it's a short story based on my incredible intuition.
A woman driven to madness, a short story, both of you said it. So, Alex, if you get the name right, you get 2 points instead of 1.
Okay.
Alex,
Yeah.
what's the name of the story?
It's the Yellow Wallpaper. I forget who the authoress is, but yeah,
Ooh.
Ta-da!
Charlotte Perkins.
it
Would not have
is.
guessed that name.
Perkins Gilman.
It is in
Charlotte
fact the
Perkins
Yellow
Gilman.
Wallpaper, and Alex gets 2 points, and Paddy gets a 1.
Which I don't really deserve, but
Right.
there we go. I'll take it.
And we go to the next one. All right, this one should be easy. Do not shout the name. A vertically limited protagonist is burdened with the destruction of a doomsday weapon of mass destruction for the sake of the whole world. Short story or a novel?
I'm gonna say. I think it's a short story.
I'm going to say short story. Oh, no, I'm going to say novel. And my reasoning, should we get with the
Yeah.
reasoning afterward?
Yeah.
Do you
yeah.
wanna give me
I
the
don't want to
name?
give Alex any clues. I don't know.
No, Alex's answer is in stone right now. He said
Yeah,
that
I'm
short
done.
story. Yours is too, by the way.
Oh,
You're
is
not.
it? Do we don't lose points for getting it wrong? So was it Doctor Strangelove?
It is.
Or how I learned to learn the
In
bomb?
fact, the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
fair enough.
So the reason I said novel is you made a point of it being vertically challenged, and I don't think there's enough room in a short story for the character's height to really be an issue in something like that.
Oh, I don't know. I think you
All
could
right.
say he was a midget in 2
Oh.
words, or a
And
short
yet
person.
it was a novel.
That-
So I don't know.
All right. Next up. A group of discriminated species overthrow the yoke of their masters and take ownership of their home, only to discover the destructive pitfalls of conflicting ideologies.
Oh.
I have a feeling long form.
Oh. Yes.
Can we,
That is.
can we say
that
what it is?
It is. Okay.
Wait, don't say. First, say what it is.
Hang on.
Short or novel, and then
Technically-
say the name.
Technically novella. But I know what it is.
Oh, technically.
Okay, but it's a
not
long
short
novella.
story though.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So it's a long short story then.
It's Animal
Just-
Farm.
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
going to
it's
say
Animal
that as well.
Boop. All right. Who am I giving the point to? I think Alex said correct.
Well, I think we both get it, don't we? Like
I
we
said
both
long
said it?
form.
Okay, 3 points. Oh, you did. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Matan, are you paying attention?
I'm just trying to win the bet, okay? All right. That was Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is tighter than I thought. A man dies and travels through space, time, and multiple dimensions in order to discover the true nature of the world, meeting the creator itself.
Short form.
Space, time, and multiple dimensions. Yeah, I'm gonna say short form, and no, I'm gonna say long form, and I think I can guess the book.
God damn
too.
it. Well, let me give my reasoning for
yes.
short form first before you get it right.
Go
My
ahead.
reasoning is that plot sounds like it could get tiresome over time. Like, stop jumping in different places, stop going to different things. Just give us something we can hold on to. Now,
Okay,
prove me wrong,
Interesting.
Alex.
Rationale.
All right,
Alex, what novel do you think
I'm
that
going to
is?
assume it's 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. That would be a novel.
I mean, that's a very good guess.
Oh, is
If
it Cloud
only
Atlas?
had it been correct. It isn't. It is The Egg by
Oh,
Andy
okay.
Weir. It is a short
Egg?
story. Are you guys familiar with The Egg? Look it
No.
up. It's a very good short
No.
story.
I'm going to make a note of it.
Exactly what I just described. There's a great YouTube video about it. Okay, so Paddy is actually close to winning this. And we continue. A man awakens to the news that he now has 3 times as many limbs, much to his family's discomfort.
Okay, that's a short story.
That's a short story. I think
Short
we
story?
both know
Okay.
what that is, Alex.
I think we both know what that is.
Should we say it on 3?
2, 3?
3.
Metamorphosis
Yeah.
by Kafka. Yeah.
Most of his family's
Nice.
discomfort.
It is indeed Metamorphosis by Kafka, and that means that the current score for those who are just listening is 5 Paddy, 4 Alex.
It's such a bummer
Okay.
of a story as well. Like,
I don't think
it's-
I actually read it. Like I don't think I've read the whole thing.
It gives you the bad feels.
Yeah.
It does
that's pretty much Kafka.
absolutely give you the bad
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
You ever read The Trial? Oh,
Yeah.
I've never wanted to pay my taxes on time so bad.
All Okay, I need more.
Terrifying.
A very peculiar story about very peculiar men for whom the very process of life seems to happen backwards.
Paddy, after you.
That's a deep cut. That's a very deep cut.
Feel like long form.
I'm gonna be honest. I think I know the story, but I don't know whether it's long form or short form. So I'm gonna say short form, but I think I do know the story.
You go ahead.
I
Benjamin Button,
believe-
right?
Yeah, it's the peculiar case of Benjamin Button.
So I just assumed long
Okay.
form because the movie is a movie.
Yeah.
But it does sound like it would be the sort of thing that would be a short story rather than a book.
It is indeed The Curious Case of Benjamin
Okay.
Button, a
Yeah,
short
alright.
story by Scott Fitzgerald.
See, my knowledge hurt there because it does sound like more short story material, but I was like, well, but it's a full movie, so
yeah.
surely.
Actually, Stephen King shorts are famously turned into long movies, even though
Yeah.
they're short stories.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, the
Like
short
the,
story,
the
we
Green
didn't-
Mile.
we didn't really talk about it,
Shawshank.
but short stories famously work well as movies because, like, a movie is
Easier
know-
to stretch out than to condense.
Yeah, and I don't think you even have to stretch it really. Anyway, it's a different conversation.
And I do believe this might be the last one.
Ooh, neck and neck.
A
5
person
all.
goes through the notes of his dead uncle and discovers a mysterious cult. The cult
Okay.
worships a monstrous human octopus dragon hybrid that lives deep underwater.
Okay, well, shit, Alex, don't say because I know you know what this is, but I don't know if it's long or short. So if you say,
Okay.
I'm just going to copy you.
Fair enough.
So, fuck, I don't
This is
know.
for the game. This is for the beer.
I know what it is, but I haven't read any Lovecraft, man. It's a short story. It's a short story. It's a short story.
It is a short story. It's the Call of Cthulhu.
Hey!
It's
All right,
It
cool.
is indeed the Call of Cthulhu, and it is indeed a short story by H.P. Lovecraft.
Very
and
good.
oh my god, we've went through all of it without a winner.
Can we do a
And
tiebreaker?
so-
One
no,
more.
no, you guys know that in the 2021 Olympics, the two guys couldn't defeat each other in the high jump, and they just agreed to share the gold medal.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I
Well,
think
that's
this
fair.
is the
We'll
most
buy each other a
educational
beer.
thing to do, and you guys can share beer and be equal to one another.
Well, neither of us buys
For
either a
eternity.
beer.
Yeah, we just sit
God.
there and stare at each other. And No one
Yeah.
drinks any beer.
Paddy, I gotta tip my hat to you. You have very good logic, even if you're not familiar with the stories, which has allowed you to go point for point with Alex Aldridge.
Toe to toe.
I can
Toe to
just
toe.
bluff without having ever read a book.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for participating. Just to wrap it up, as you guys know, we always include a quote in our story, but we kind of actually used our one quote already. I think Alex kind of shot his shot. So, Alex, why don't you just repeat yourself?
Okay. So there are perfect short stories. There are no perfect novels. And that's by J.G. Ballard, infamous science fiction
Infamous?
short story
Yeah.
writer. Yeah. Of I believe it's called Crash, a man who gets erotically turned on by car accidents and also
Oh my
High
God, wow.
Rise. Yeah.
need
he's
more.
quite a man.
I didn't enjoy High Rise. I stopped reading it. I got about a
I
third of the way
actually-
through and
I
thought
liked
this
it.
felt really flat.
Yeah,
Okay.
I liked it a lot. I thought it's kind of weird, but yeah, I felt like a failed experiment or like a not totally successful experiment, but I did enjoy it,
Yeah.
I have to say.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thank you so much for joining on to discuss short stories.
Oh.
Listeners, if you are listening, look, short stories are great ways to build your career and abilities as a writer. You know, like it lets you work
Definitely.
on things like the endings, the climax. Because every time you write a novel, you really get only one twist, one ending, one climax.
Yeah.
With short stories, you get to do that every time, a lot more often.
Get to iterate.
Work on your craft. It's fun. It's easier to get out there. You know, there are so many resources out there, so many places for you to submit your stuff. Alex, you've been published a few times. Your short stories have done very well.
Thank you.
Paddy, your short stories are amazing as well. It really is something we couldn't recommend enough. Write short stories. Also, it's easier to get your friends to read them. Okay, try to drop a novel on your
Yeah.
friend. You'll never hear from
Yeah.
them again.
You really
Yeah.
won't.
Flash fiction, just grab their sleeve and hold them down, and you can get it done
Yeah.
with.
Alex recently sent me the 2,000-word crime story he entered into the competition he was mentioning in the beginning, and I was so happy to receive it. Like, I can read this in 15 minutes. This is great. And it was done quickly, and it ended on a strong note. I'm like, I actually
and your friendship is not damaged by
I'm not like texting him. It's a commitment. It's a big commitment to it's a big commitment to get your friends to read your stuff.
It's also like sending a fruitcake to someone, like send a fruitcake.
Look, they'll do it, but they just might not be happy with you about it. Like, I still like one of the people in the Precipice group, I still owe like a couple of read-throughs of a novel.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
You guys are great. Thank you so much for joining. I'll just remind our amazing listeners that we have a short story anthology out and about, available on Amazon.
Oh, you like
it's called
stories,
The New Mythic. You can have it. We can have it as an audiobook. You can listen to it. You can read it. It's terrific. And also, I'll plug Alex Eldridge's Golden Hour short story anthology. If you're looking to scratch that itch, we have more of that. We really hope you enjoyed. If you did, please review us on whatever platform you're listening to podcast. And stay tuned for more news on The New Mythic 2. The name is a work in progress. We'll have more news soon. Take care, listeners. And thank you, Alex and Paddy.
Thank you, Matan.
Thank you.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.